What's up? You are now listening to Americanized, a storytelling podcast where you will hear from eclectic first and second generation Americans share their stories and real life experiences as children of immigrants. Hey there, welcome to another episode of Americanized. I'm your host, Roslyn, and today you get to hear from Jason. Jason is a celebrity hairstylist who lives in the Beverly Hills and Los Angeles area. Not only that, but he's also the host of the podcast I Told My Hairdresser, which is a comedy podcast where celebrity hairstylists' stories meet outrageous salon chaos. So you really get the inside scoop on the experiences that Jason has as a celebrity hairstylist. The podcast pulls back the curtain on the wildest, funniest, and most unbelievable stories from behind the chair. I will link the information to his podcast in the show notes, so be sure to check that out. In this episode, Jason and I talk about our identities and where we found ourselves fitting in growing up. Jason grew up in San Diego, which he found to be a very white supremacist area. Stay tuned to hear his story.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say for me, my mother, I'm half. So my father's from Texas and my mother's from Honduras in Central America. And they met in San Diego, and that's where I was born. Mm-hmm. And when people think of San Diego, they think sunshine and beaches. But what they don't know is that there's also a lot of like white supremacy out there as well, though, too. So it becomes pretty hard on Latin people there, especially with Mexico being so close, and we're all kind of lumped into the same kind of like race, I guess you could say, you know? So for me, I'm very lucky because I'm very light skinned and I look exactly like my father. So I can hide in plain sight. That's for sure. But then when someone hears me speaking in Spanish, they look over and they're like, whoa, 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 where'd that come from? And I'm like, it's my first language. You know, because it's kind of funny because people think that all Latinos come with a burro and a bottle of tequila. And I go, no, we look like everyday normal people like everybody else does, you know. And it was, and that's why my mother endured a lot of racism. She moved here when she was 17. So that would put her in 1966. When she moved to San Diego, and it was very different. So she actually told me that she gave me the whitest possible name she could possibly think of, so that way I could acclimate in, you know, and I wouldn't have to go through the same things that she went through as after she got here when she was 17 years old, which I completely understand, you know. But it's kind of weird because you have parents who, like, I have my mother who's like, this is how we do it in my country, and yet we live in this country, and I'm trying to assimilate, you know, and be part of the culture here, you know, and yet I find myself getting torn between two different things because I have a white father and a Latin mother. So I identify with the Latin people, but then they don't identify with me because they see a lot of privilege in me because I look so light. I'm so white. Mm-hmm. You know, even though we speak the same languages and have the same cultural background, I was never really invited in. And then that happened to the same thing with my father's family. And, you know, it's like, oh, well, you're a half-breed. You know, so it's like you're not really white, but then you're really not really Latin. You're kind of somewhere in the middle. Mm-hmm. You know, and I've actually having encountered some racism from that growing up in San Diego. It was a big military town. And we were at the beach one night, and some guys joined our bonfire down at the beach one night, and I remember exactly how it happened, but they were talking about nationality and races where everyone came from. And when my friend says, hey, that's Jason, he's half-Honduran, he speaks Spanish. And they're saying that because they thought they were kind of proud of like, hey, I speak two languages and that. These guys didn't see it that way. And actually one guy came up from behind me and knocked me out cold because of it. And yelled half-breed. So it's kind of weird, you know, growing up in a situation like that where you're kind of like not sure like if you should tell people, you should not tell people. I mean, mm-hmm. It's just kind of weird. Or the questions that people do have for you
Right.
sometimes where it's like, I was never part of my mother's culture. I was never immersed really in that because there's not a lot of Hondurans in my area. All there was just more like Mexican, and it's a different country. It's a different culture.
Absolutely.
They're similar, but they're different.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, is a very unique way to kind of grow up.
Yeah. It's funny how we as people just carry these assumptions with us, and even being first generation or second generation Americans, we do this to each other, I feel like, all the time too. Just assuming this person is from this area because they look a certain way, or even you telling me that you're half Honduras, or you probably do look a lot like your dad. I don't know what your dad looks like, but white passing, we can say, well, you are half white, so.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
I do. And that's what I think scares a lot of people, It's like, I'm not in a bad, sometimes, but even at work, I'm a hairdresser. And I'm at work and I was speaking to a client in Spanish who was from Venezuela. And someone walked over to me and she was like, "You're Mexican?"
Oh.
No. Yeah. And I go, "Why?" She goes, "Well, I heard you speaking." I said, "Mexican?" She goes, "Yeah." I go, "Wow. I was speaking Spanish. That's my first language, and I'm not Mexican."
Wow.
And Spanish actually started in Europe, not here,
exactly.
in Mexico. And I'm actually half Honduran. She goes, "Oh, that's why." I went, "That's why what?"
Exactly.
And this literally happened 6 months ago.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. It's like we think that these things don't happen anymore, and they do.
They do.
Yep. and they do, and it's just like it's a frightening thing the way people think.
Absolutely.
As opposed to embracing.
Yeah.
It's like we're a huge melting pot in this country, and we're a country of immigrants from the beginning.
I say that all the time.
We've been a country of immigrants.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that we should be proud of that. We should be embracing it, as opposed to putting people in little pockets and like, this is your corner. This is your corner. Yeah,
this is what you're supposed to do because X, Y, Z. Like, we love doing that. I think as an American people, or humans in general, I think might be more. I think it's a universal thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Everything has to be categorized and put into a box.
It doesn't have to.
It's like, oh, well, you're this over here, you're that over there, and it's like, we all should actually get to know each other and just kind of be friendly and, probably have a better community that way.
Absolutely. I was having this conversation because I feel like when we, as first or second generation Americans, it does take us a while to accept ourselves and our identity and embrace it. And I feel like if we can't do that for ourselves, we can't expect other people to always do that for us or to carry that for us. So I do definitely agree with that, embracing it, and other people embracing just differences and not expecting one way or the other.
And it's hard when you have so many people going through and saying like, well, you should be represented this way and you should be represented that way. It's like, I'm my own person. And it's almost like you feel like you don't have your own country in a sense. So I remember my grandfather, he moved up here from Honduras for a short period of time. And when he was getting up in age, he decided to go back to Honduras, and that's where he wanted to die because that was his country,
right, his homeland. Yeah.
And it was like there was something about that's like, where's my homeland? Because I'm kind of torn in half a little bit, as I have half my mother and half of my father, and so I just kind of think like, well, I guess that's San Diego because I was born there.
You're like, it's a literal half and half.
It is. Yeah. It's really weird.
Yeah.
So you kind of, you get torn, and I went to therapy with my mother one time. She asked me to come to visit with the therapist, and we actually were talking about this. I was like, listen, I'm like, my mother was like, you're from this country. I'm from this country. This is the way that we do things. And this is why I wanted to go through and get installed with my family and my son. And I said, yes. I'm like, I understand that you're from there, but you raised me here in the United States. And it's like, we live in this culture now. Yeah. And even the therapist was kind of like, she kind of had to agree with me a little bit on that one, and it kind of hurt my mother. And I got that. I understand that. I get how that kind of hurts her a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's like, if you want to go through and have your child grow up in that culture, then you need to stay in that culture, or assimilate everything around you that's going to be like that, Yeah. And that's unfortunately not the case in this area. Even with San Diego being such a large Latin community around there, I wasn't accepted in too much. So, yeah.
I guess I do have a few things going through my head. You did say that San Diego doesn't have a big Honduras community.
No.
I'm wondering, well, I guess your mom is fully Honduras. Does she feel accepted in those in Hispanic communities there?
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. Is like right now, she considers herself to be an American citizen now. So she is Honduran, and she does have friends that are Latin, and she does feel accepted with them. But then she also feels like she's also like American.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, though, we were actually at Costco the other day, and we were with my son, he speaks Spanish as well. We speak to him in Spanish, but he looks just like me. And my mother was speaking to him in Spanish inside the Costco, and one of the employees walked over to her and said, "Hey, be very careful, because you don't want to be speaking Spanish in public around here." And I looked at this guy, and I was like, "Whoa, where'd that come from?" And he goes, "Well, ICE is in the parking lot, just to let you know."
Wow.
I was like, oh my God. And my mom was like, "I'm an American citizen now." I go, "Right, but you don't look it."
Right.
She doesn't. She looks Latin. She has the olive skin. She's 5'2", even she has me walking next with her 6 foot and white, you know what I mean? So it's like, but it was like one of those things where you didn't think that in the country that you've been in since 1966, that's something you have to worry about, so especially because you are a naturalized citizen. So it was kind of a weird kind of a wake up call. You know what I mean? I'm thinking to myself now too, I'm like, am I an anchor baby? I don't know. Kind of a weird thing to kind of ponder with the new politics that are kind of going around right now.
Yeah. What is that term, anchor baby? I don't think I've heard it before.
It's people that come from different countries and have children here because you're considered a United States citizen as soon as you're born in the United States. Mm-hmm. So what happens is that people from different countries will have a child in the United States, and that way they're born an actual citizen, and they're called anchor babies.
Oh, okay. So, yeah. Me and you.
So I was like, well, my mother's from a different country, even though she is a naturalized citizen, and I was born here. So would I be considered one of those as well, too?
Right.
So it was just one of the things with the politics, everything that's kind of going on now. It's just something to think about. I just found it quite odd.
It is. There's a lot of factors.
My mom goes back to San Diego quite often, and I've told her, actually, even though she has a passport, not to go to Mexico and cross the border back and forth, because I don't know what they could do now, or not let her back into the country. I'm not quite sure, just because she comes from a Honduran background.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a weird thing to actually kind of think about nowadays, especially with the political climate that's kind of going on. So
definitely a lot to think about. It's just a lot of caution. We have to be really cautious, Mexican or not. If you look Latino, Latina, Hispanic, it just matters how you look at this.
Very true. That's the problem now. All it is just how you look, and they can actually profile, But on the other half of it, though, is that I became a hairdresser. Mm-hmm. And my first language is Spanish. And so I worked for a large hairdressing company. And the nice part of it is that I got to go through and get all the Latin American classes. So I've been to 22 different countries doing hair, Latin American, Asian, and European countries. but I got all of the Latin countries because I spoke the language. They didn't need a translator for me. So it actually pushed me up in my career. And then it brought people in because we would teach courses to people on how to cut hair. So we could actually advertise in Latin countries and have people come in, and we didn't need a translator for it. They would have me to go through and teach the classes. So I would get paid more. I would get to go to like amazing countries like Costa Rica and Chile and Colombia and experience that.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome.
it's kind of a double-edged sword, I guess you could say. You know what I mean? So I could actually go through and go down there and have people understand me. And at the exact same time, you know, I got to get a lot of these great trips that all my other colleagues wouldn't get, which was awesome.
Yeah. How did you get into hairdressing?
My mother's a hairdresser, and I grew up in her hair salon.
Oh, nice.
And because of that, I would go to hair shows with her. And I was doing terrible in school, absolutely terrible. And so I decided to go to beauty school because I saw these guys doing hair up on stage. I thought, like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
And literally within like 3 years and just a lot of hard work, that's where I positioned myself into doing that. And I actually got to go through and travel, you know, to 22 different countries doing hair all over the place.
Wow. I love that. I love how your mother inspired that for you.
That was the thing. It's just like, you know, I did follow her into that. You know, my mother is a big part of my life. That's for sure. You know, and then her family was as well too. I got very lucky because my dad's family didn't accept us because he did marry someone who was Latin, which was really, really tough. You know, because I had uncles who, you know, would call you like you're well, like, they say very derogatory things like, "Oh, there's our half-spick nephews" or something like that. You know, and then when I became a hairdresser, they started calling me all the, you know, homosexual slurs. So I was a hairdresser,
right,
you know, even though I'm married and have a kid, it didn't matter to them. They're just like, you know, they just kind of lump you in, you know, and which was kind of odd. But with my mother's family, I did end up with them. I actually am a lot closer, which is nice. You know, because a lot of them did move up here to the United States.
Okay, nice.
So we kind of had each other, which was really, really nice.
Yeah, so you do have that sense of community with them. And I'm curious how, I was just assuming that your mother spoke English or Spanish to you growing up, and that's how you picked it up as it being your first language?
Correct. So, and that was the thing, is like, it was my first language. Awesome. It was only that Spanish was only spoken in the house. My dad would speak to us in English, but he really wanted us to learn Spanish. So my mother would only speak to us in English. And then when we went to school, my mother only spoke to us in Spanish, but when I started school, it was only English. In fact, I was actually told, I remember I couldn't say a word. I didn't know what the word was in English, so I said it in Spanish, and I actually got in trouble for that.
At school? Wow.
So I remember my teacher saying, like, this is the United States. We speak English here.
She did not say that.
Oh, yeah, she did. It was like 1978. It was a long time ago. You know what I mean? So,
okay. That's fair. That's fair. The year that matches. Okay. I'm like, whoa, we do not say that anymore.
Thank God we don't have that now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe in some parts of the country, I'm not quite sure. You know what I mean? That's still kind of up for debate.
I mean,
but I'm in Seattle now, and let me tell you, that kind of thing will not fly. I mean, a teacher would be reprimanded, and definitely might be some, you know, a lot of words said after something like that. Because my wife is a high school teacher.
Oh, is she? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I know at the high school that she's at, there would be some strong words from the principal with that teacher for saying something like that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for listening. I hope to catch you in the next episode where you will hear part 2 from Jason, where he shares more stories and more experiences and what it's like for him to be a celebrity hairstylist. All original music produced by Stubborn Saul. You can find him on all music listening platforms at STBRN SAO.